accepted.
Good morning. My name is Johan Hutting. I work for a company called ING. You probably know it because we're also in Poland. And I'm mainly a software engineer there, but I'm also doing architecture and looking at the future and new technologies. However, when I was a bit younger and had a little bit more hair on my head, I also was working on something called a chess program. If my clicker works, come on. Yeah, there you go. In my teens, I built a chess program because I thought it was interesting to build something that could simulate intelligence. So I was working on a neural network engine and also a calculating engine. And since this is a long time ago, we didn't have the technology and the algorithms back then to really speed things up. That's different nowadays. So the things I did then was drop the neural network because it was really too bad at chess. But the program I built to calculate did participate in the Dutch championship because that did work well. It also includes some things like learning the opening book, learning the end game, etc. So those technologies are quite interesting. And finally, we're moving ahead. Since about 6-7 months, we do see new AI technologies coming up, being quite promising. And as you can see with the guy on the right, he's completely, you should do this, everything is perfect. And the guy on the left's like, I don't know yet. Or maybe even Skynet is coming. I don't think both are right. I think it's somewhere in between. You should look at the possibilities there are and what can we do with it as a developer. So we're not going to dive into code. I'm not going to do live coding, but I'm going to show you some examples and some products that are available now at this moment that will help you out as a developer. What do they mean for you? What you should take care of, should pay attention to. So there's no doom and gloom. We're not going to get Skynet, you're not going to lose your job might change, but that's normal. 5 years ago, I couldn't tell anyone what I would be doing now, and 5 years before that, I also couldn't tell what would happen 5 years later. It's inherent to our work. You have to be agile also in learning new technologies and new frameworks, etc. So what we do get is some new promising AI technologies. In the past years, you have seen ChatGPT, you've seen Copilot, but we'll also look at some graphical stuff and what you can do with it as a developer. So the benefits are there. They're not all benefits. It does look good at times, but it also has some downsides. So we'll cover those. And too fast, come on. My clicker is a bit malfunctioning at the moment. Which elements should we approach with caution? And that also has to do with, I work for a bank, trust is important, and you don't want to betray the trust of your customers, so everything has to be perfect. So if you let an AI give the wrong answers, people trust that, mistakes happen, you are responsible. That's not a good thing. So the new technologies are mainly pre-trained transformers. Short, GPT, you know GPT-4, you know ChatGPT, but also all the images generators, they're also using those technologies at the moment because the machines are faster, the algorithms are better, and we can actually see how that improves our work. So you don't have to look at the nice big image. I'm not going to explain that because I can spend 50 minutes on it. But it is coming from a paper that was derived by Google Brain. So Google, who is now running a bit behind, made this up, shared this with the rest of the world, and it's being picked up by other companies at the moment. Which sounds a bit silly, but... the main benefit you have to remember, though, without diving too much into the image, is that it can handle a lot of content, a lot more than before, while keeping context. And that's the most important part. So if you split up a book in words, you do know which words belong together, why they belong together. That's something that the machinery can handle very, very well. And that's something that's quite new. All by this transformer setup. So from 2018 and onwards, that you get OpenAI, which started GPT-1, but it couldn't do too much yet, so you didn't hear too much about it. Only when GPT-3 came out last year, things started getting more traction. We'll see much more stuff coming up. You can also apply this to pictures, but also to, for instance, music. So why don't we have music generators? That's quite simple. There's a lot of legal frameworks around it to protect that. So anyone that tries to set up a GPT engine that generates music for you is typically shut down within a couple of days or months. and there's no money to make there, so you only see it in images and in text. So the important part as well for this AI layer is that you have a large language model, and that contains all the words. It's a gigantic database with all the words and how they belong together in context. And on top of that, there's the reinforced learning from human feedback. So if you just combine context, you can still get very odd sentences or combinations. I'm pretty sure you've seen some of the AI-generated art that looks like insane. Doesn't make any sense. The reinforced learning on top makes it more human-like, because there's a real human looking at it, saying, no, this is good, this is not good. If you use ChatGPT as well, you see a thumbs up and a thumbs down. So if an answer is good, you can actually click thumbs up, and it's learning from that, so it's improving its answers. Come on. There you go. So we have ChatGPT, and I'm sure most of you have played around with it already, because it's been around for, I think, well, maybe 6-7 months now. But there's a lot of things you can do with it, including if you get a long text and you don't have time to fully read it, which kids do a lot in school. We have a lot of conversations about that in the Netherlands. Because kids didn't read books anymore. They would just say, hey, ChatGPT, I have this book or I have this text. Tell me, what are the key points? So I can just pass my test. That's easy. It's also nice if someone sends you a very long email, like this long, and you have to read it, and you only have 5 minutes to respond. You could say again, give me the key points. It's really, really good at that. It can also explain you a subject, but the interesting part about it is that it does that on a certain level. So if I have a subject like chemistry, and I would say, explain to me like I am a grandpa, it will go to that level, or like a primary school student. So it will adapt to the public if you ask it to. And you can also, because it's conversationalist, make a deeper dive. Oh, I don't understand this part. Can you explain it further for me? And it will actually do that while remembering the context of the conversation you're in. It can even give you suggestions for names or concepts, but typically names are quite interesting. You could say, I want to start a new company in this subject. Give me 25 examples, and you can just pick a nice name. Normally you would take a couple of hours perhaps to discuss some stuff. Maybe not get the best name, but in this case you get a good list of examples that you can actually use. It will also support you with things like poetry or writing a song or song text. You cannot make the music with it. As mentioned, there's some legal issues with that. And as just explained, you can also do targeted explanations. So if you have are a developer and you want to explain something to the business party, so they're not too well-versed in technological descriptions, then you can actually ask it to translate your technical text to a more functional text for them, so they understand what you're talking about, which is sometimes difficult for us as a developer. So it can also act as an assistant. Well, we had Google Assistants for years. Google I/O was actually 1 month ago, and they didn't mention too much about assistants, because they do have a new product now, Bard, which is working in a different context. So you still have Assistant, which is very personal, and you have Bard, which is very broad. The same will also happen with the Bing solutions. And of course, you can also make a call assistant. You have an issue, explain this to me, and then make a deep dive, normally with flow scheme. I will come back to that later on. But in this case, you will also be able to make a sidestep, and it will follow you around. From a developer perspective and also an architectural perspective, it also allows you to generate plant UML diagrams, which is always quite annoying to start with. So you just give it a story, make me this, and you can then make a deeper dive on how to improve it. So it will save you a lot of work as a developer. And it can supply you design for websites. So if you are a basic website designer, I would suggest to find some other job, because this is something, it's so basic, it will be resolved like that. It's what's costing you 1 hour or maybe a couple of days will cost this machine like 5 seconds and it's done. Same quality. Another nice part is that it can also generate some code examples for you. So if you want to practice a new technology or you have an interview then at that point, you can ask it to make some examples. So if you want to train something, it can help you. So if you also want to prepare for an interview, it will also be quite helpful if you don't know a subject that well anymore. But it can also generate some questions for the interviewee as well. If my clicker is working. So the nice thing, I'm also doing interviews at times, you have a feedback loop. So what I did is give me 5 examples for the next interviewee coming. And I would see like great examples, but I maybe only have half an hour or 1 hour for this person. So why don't we give me those 5 examples that can be finished within half an hour? So it will remember the context. There's no extra information from my side. It will continue in the conversation. So it will keep on remembering that. That's the main benefit of these new transformer engines. Which also brings us to the chatbots, because if you call a company or you try to resolve something and you run into a chatbot, what you typically do is to try to work around it, because you want to speak to a real person who understands you, who understands your problem. And the issue we have with these standard chatbots at the moment is that they are flow diagrams. So as long as you fit within the problem, it will work very well. If you don't, it won't know the context of that, it won't do a follow-up, it won't do a sidestep. And these new GPT engines, they do allow you to do this. There's one thing, however, and that's something to keep in mind, is that if you would require customer data, like I have this type of bank account and I need help with it, you would send that data to the cloud. And within GDPR, you cannot. So there's something to work around. So maybe we should ask for permission. And if you give permission, then we can continue at that point. However, it will be more efficient. So if you typically see the chatbots, I think in general they solve 50–60% of the cases. So all those 40–50%, they're not helped. They really need a natural person to help them along. So what if we could get it to 80 or 90%? We would get much happier customers. They will be helped much faster. And the people who help them with that 10 or 20% can be specialists who will get much more satisfaction from the job as well. So as a developer, you maybe also need to make some designs. And yeah, you could use a whiteboard, take a picture of it, but you know how that goes. A picture doesn't last because you can't extend the picture. You would have to draw it again on a board and take another picture. So if you use plant UML for a design, and I made it a simple one because it had to fit on the screen, you would just tell it an explanation of what you're trying to do, generate me plant UML diagram, and it will generate it, and it will actually look like this. This is just 2–3 seconds, and it's done. So I just type out, I want to do this, and of course, if you have a more complex system, it will also do that perfectly. You do sometimes have to correct some connections, but it's saving you a lot of work, so you can be more focused on the job at hand. One issue, however, is that it can be quite hallucinating. And I've done this talk twice now. For every conference I do, I always think of a new question to discuss, but it's about anagrams. And anagrams are like when you hustle letters around. So if you tell this to a human being, they will tell you, you're insane, this is not possible, I cannot give you 10 examples. ChatGPT does, because the answering of the question is more important than the quality of the question. So if you look at this, well, I cut out 7, but there was 10. Only one answer is a real word, only one. And it's even a Polish word, not even English. So as a follow-up in the same conversation, I'm asking, what is an anagram? So it should be able to know this logic, like, oh, an anagram means you just hustle the letters around, you keep the same amount of letters, which it correctly answers, but the previous answer was not correct. It should have told me, this is not, I cannot answer this question for you because I don't have an answer. This is something to keep in mind. There have been worse examples. It is getting better, which also has to do with the human-enforced learning, like don't do this, don't do this. But we still have a long way to go. So never fully rely on the answer a GPT engine gives you. You still need the human knowledge and the human experience to validate that what's returned is correct. The style is perfect. It's correct English, correct Polish, correct Dutch. No issue there. But the substance, the meaning, the logic, that's sometimes completely missing. So these GPT engines, They are a probability matrix. So they've read billions of books, texts, forum posts, and they know which words belong together, make a lot of sense. But they're based on the internet, and as you know, the internet is not always right. Actually, sometimes it's not right, because a lot of people post stuff that's not correct. They will get the upper layer at that point, so they will be picked more often. It is, after all, chance. So this can lead to hallucinating results. It can even tell you, no, I'm right, you're wrong. Well, it clearly is not right. So really keep that in mind when you do apply a GPT solution and you have no human correction afterwards. It is quite tricky. On the other hand, we have seen they give quite a lot of interesting texts. And yeah, as mentioned, it can be very confident and correct looking. It's like a salesman trying to sell you something. Oh, that sounds good. It's very confident about what's coming out, but it doesn't have to be. And one thing to also keep in mind, we've seen many companies now, I think Samsung did it, Apple does it. There's many companies there. Amazon also mentioned this to their employees. Stop sending data to ChatGPT. Stop using some remote cloud solutions. We don't know what is happening with the data. If it's learning from it, which Amazon had, they had Amazon internal solutions pop up in ChatGPT. It can be some luck, because you can have the same idea at different locations at the same time. But it's still tricky. We don't know how ChatGPT and other chat engines work internally. So for the future, I would expect us to use this, as the technology is quite promising, but run it on-premise, so within your own network, within your own company, so you have control over what happens. And if things go wrong, if it starts hallucinating, that you can correct it for your specific company or department. But we are developers, so what we like to do, we would like to, the boring code stuff, you want to get rid of it. But what I do with these AI tooling is that I consider them a rubber ducky, a colleague pair programming with you, sitting next to you, giving you some feedback, some ideas. Because it does keep context, you can start a discussion with it, like, hey, what if I do this? Oh, this is not the solution, let's try another one. And it will actually keep track of that, that's quite nice. However, the current solutions we have in Copilot and Code Whisperer I'm also covering is that it's like IntelliJ, which we've had for, well, years, 15, 20 years maybe by now. And as you might know if you use it, it often works well, but it also sometimes doesn't work well. And the problem with solutions we have in IntelliJ now is that it's all hard-coded. It has specific solutions for a specific problem. These AI tooling can be a bit more flexible in that. So I do see some chances there to improve upon it. Make it better for us as a developer, less infringing on our focus, so we can be more aimed at our goal. Because if you break the focus, you know, it's always costing you time as a developer, unfortunately. And I have tried it for a couple of months now. I think 80% of the time it's working wonderful. You feel like in the zone, you're building stuff quickly, and it's all nice, and you're making a lot more speed within delivering a solution. It's really augmenting your abilities. And you're learning from it as well, because you do see new solutions pop up sometimes. However, I've also seen, especially Copilot, end up with a missing curly brace, so the code doesn't even compile. It doesn't know that. There's a structural knowledge, like it knows by chance, like, oh, those belong together. It's language after all. But it doesn't know that the code doesn't compile within Java or within Kotlin or whatever language you're using at that point. And that is really taking you out of the zone, because, hey, what's happening? Okay, remove it, and I will do it myself, which is basically costing you time. So Copilot became available for free 2 years ago. I didn't use it back then because I thought, I will hear some people say, oh, it's nice, and I will take a look at it. I did try it out 4 months ago, and like I said, 80% of the time it is really helping you out, so it's quite nice. And what they do is they complete your current code, and they do it in many modern languages. So anything you have in GitHub, if there's a lot of substance in it, so you have Go, you have Kotlin, you have Java, C, and JavaScript, it will really be giving you good instruction because of the amount of feedback it has. However, it also uses bad quality code, so that's something to keep in mind. And those languages are nice, but it's also helping you out if you write a comment. So you don't even write the function yet, but you say, I want you to generate code that does this, and it will actually generate it for you at that point. I find that really helpful. It's like sitting next to someone and explaining, oh, let's build this, and they will start coding for you, and you will look at them. So it's really like pair programming without a real person. 2 months ago, 3 months ago, it was announced by Microsoft as well that they will also include this within PowerPoint, within Outlook, within Word, within Excel to help you out. Which does sound nice, and of course they do show you examples that work perfectly. You do have nice formulas, you can actually generate a presentation like this. But the content still requires a lot of fiddling around. They also announced 1.5 weeks ago a build that they were going to implement this in Windows. And then they gave the example like, oh, you can ask for the weather at the moment, or you can ask for a time in a specific place, which is what Google already had for 10 years. I don't really see the benefits there, and I was hoping they would give us more examples of what the added value would be of this AI, other than having join the hype train. So we'll see in the coming year. I'm really curious what we'll have in 1 year from now. The quality is so-so, and that's really... I haven't played around with the Microsoft solutions yet, within Outlook or PowerPoint, like, hey, generate this presentation for me. I think that's available soon, but I do hope the quality is good. So it does take away some of the boring stuff for me and helps me write a better story and do a better talk, have more text to explain you how things are working without spending like an hour like, should I rewrite the sentence or not? It doesn't sound too well. That's where I do see the benefits. Maybe also writing a letter or an email, helping you out. This mail is about this subject, and then it actually auto-fills up, and you just correct the minor parts, saving you time. One of the things I was a bit worried about is because GitHub and Copilot used all the GitHub code. Years ago, I gave security trainings, and I also had a project there called Leaky Bucket, which was meant to be repaired and fixed. But of course, the solution is not in the original code, so it learned from bad code. And of course, this will happen with students also posting their code, still learning the craft. And there's no way to say, stop using this. I want you to use this project, but I don't want you to use that one, because that's a bad quality project and it's meant to be. And you can have no influence on it at all. Another thing to keep in mind, and that's Copilot has this, but also Code Whisperer, your code is shared. So if you have open source project that you don't care about, that the code is shared, it's all fine. But if you have internal projects from your company and use the same IntelliJ with the same plugin, you switch project and it learns from the code. So in some companies, this will be restricted. They do offer an enterprise solution which won't upload code, at least so they say, but I do see more in on-premise software running this. So it will run within your company, it won't go outside to the internet, basically. And there are some lawsuits regarding, like I mentioned, I don't want some code to be used within Copilot. Many open source projects, they were also on GitHub for years. They said, I don't want this. So these court cases are ongoing. They can have impact. So maybe the quality will even go down over years if those court cases are lost by the Copilot team. We don't know yet. There was also Code Whisperer, which is completely free. You can just sign up. It's still in beta, and you can play around. And in average, they do give better code. And I think that has to do with Amazon handpicking which code is shared. So they're not saying use the entire internet in GitHub, but they only pick their own preferred solutions. And I also will see this happening if you have something on premise, that you can tell this AI to use your own code examples and your own code structures, because every company typically has their own preferences in how you solve certain things. If you build something in Spring, it's different from when you build an EE project or a Quarkus project, for instance. So depending on what your company uses, you will get different results and different suggestions. The Kotlin code really was much, much better in Code Whisperer. That's really something I noticed. It really kept me much more in the zone. I did see a lot of issues with the Kotlin code in Copilot, unfortunately. And yeah, as mentioned, there are some challenges there. The main question you have to think about is, I'm running this, can I share my own internal code outside? Typically you can't. So the domain knowledge as well. Can you tell other companies, ask yourself, can I upload a document about my domain or my code? Can I upload it to Stack Overflow or to a wiki somewhere? If the answer is no, which is likely the case, then you do have a challenge here, unless you can block it. One of the other challenges I found is that typically where you use this is boring code. And boring code is in the boilerplates. I want to build this, and oh yeah, I have to do an equals. Well, okay, do it for me. That's easy. But if it makes mistakes, because it's not 100% perfect, how will you be focused on testing this well? Because it was boring code to begin with, you didn't write it yourself, you just copy-pasted it. It's like copy-pasting an answer from Stack Overflow, which sometimes also doesn't work. So this is something to keep in mind. How will I stay focused on finding the right solutions, even though it saves me time? But my most worrisome part is what will happen to juniors? Because you're all here because you're already experienced, you want to learn more stuff. But if you're a junior, you still need to learn the craft. And all you do is say, hey, Copilot, build this for me. What will you learn? We know which answers to ask. We know which solutions are less likely to be good. A junior doesn't know that yet. So typically, you put them next to a media or senior, and they will learn the craft along the way. How will they continue to do this if you have an AI doing this for you? How can we safeguard that? That's quite interesting. As said, I'm also doing interviews. So in case you're in an interview and you block the usage of these coding tools, but you do use it within the company, then how would you know if they can apply it well? Because you won't see how they apply it. So if you do decide to use Copilot or Code Whisperer or any other solution that does this within your company, do think about is that if you want to augment your developers, also let them try the same tool when they do the code test if you do an interview with them. So images. Well, we are developers, but we do sometimes use images. I was planning to use all our stock images, bring them into one of the generating engines, and then use our branding style on it, which is quite interesting, but those images are copyrighted by the photographers, and they only gave us permission to use them as a full-size image within a presentation without modifying it. And if I feed it to an AI, I will be modifying it. As you can also see in the image, I told it to make a picture of a robot painting, creating a painting. And it turned out to be a robot in a painting, but also outside the painting. So it doesn't fully comprehend what is happening here, because those panels, that should be where the painting stops. And it doesn't, because the engine to generate this doesn't comprehend this part. Typically, and because I do like to run stuff locally, so I'm really focusing on stuff we can run without external dependencies or to the cloud. You have Stable Diffusion as an open source solution. And you can run this on your local laptop, if you have a decent one. And you can run it from a Python script as well. So you can actually generate continuously some nice images, for instance, to explain things to people. What I still want to do is when I do a talk, that it will listen to my talk, translate the text, and then generate images based on the text. So you have a real-life movie starting up due to the story I'm telling. And you can also use it to generate an image based on another image, which is the most interesting part. So what I've seen people do is typically like, oh, I'm taking a tourist picture here in Krakow. I don't want this person next to me in the picture, remove him. That's easy. You can also have a children's drawing and tell him, okay, I want to have a good-looking image of the family, and they end up with this, which might not be you. It does, however, give quite some interesting results. We are beyond the part where we have 6 fingers or 3 legs. That's fixed by now, but we're still making quite some steps there. So I think in half a year or a year from now, we see a lot more better quality images coming out. And as mentioned, I could have fed the ING images on top, like, hey, use this style and create some nice images for my presentation, so I don't have to actually look them up myself. But the permission part is an issue, and you don't want any lawsuits coming up to you, like, hey, you use my image without any permission, because you don't know what the source is of the data. And you can't tell a Stable Diffusion or any other engine or ChatGPT, like, hey, this data, where is it coming from? It's coming from the big pile of data, and yeah, it can be anywhere. My laptop is fast enough, but if you don't have this or you don't have a very good graphical card, then typically you can also do this online. It's a bit limited, I think, in 15 examples for an hour, and then you can do it again, which works quite well. But typically, for the image I showed earlier, I just set it to run like make me 100, and well, 15 minutes, a cup of coffee, it was done. But we also have DALL-E and Midjourney, and DALL-E was the first one, I think, already last year coming out. You don't hear anything about it anymore because Midjourney is the go-to commercial solution at the moment. And well, most of you have seen the Pope come by, looking quite realistic. You can still see it's generated due to some lighting in some parts of it. And of course, that the context is completely unexpected and different. However, DALL-E, yeah, it uses GPT-3. And I think the GPT-4 one is coming, but I haven't heard when yet. But they are paid. And if you're paid and some competing product does better, then people move to the competing product. So at the moment, Midjourney is the go-to solution. Half a year ago, they were more artsy, so you could generate like painting-like images. But since V5, which I think came out 3 months ago, they are much more better at generating picture-like images, like reflections in mirrors. You could look through a window. That's something DALL-E doesn't do yet at the moment. Yeah, the Pope and Trump image are quite interesting because the guy who generated the Trump being arrested image was banned from the platform for generating fake news. That's also something to keep in mind if you do generate those images. And before, you had free entrance to that. You could generate just 25 pictures to check it out. And after this happened, they said, no, we're not going to do that anymore because people are abusing it. So now you always have to pay for Midjourney. People already know the product, so you no longer have to experiment with it. But as a developer, keep in mind the copyright stuff. And like I mentioned, it would be perfect for me as a presenter to have some nice images coming along. This is the context, just give me 10 images and I will pick the nice one. But typically, if you just build code, there's not too much going on. You can make some logos, you can make some buttons on websites, for instance. That's also working quite well. But we do have ChatGPT. And for designs, I sometimes also use ChatGPT. I need to make a simple screen. And the interesting part about this one is that you see the line on the right is not a straight line. A human wouldn't do that because they would know the context around it and the meaning of it, and an AI engine does not do that. And this worked quite well. So if I give him this image and I would say, generate me the HTML for this and the CSS, it will just generate it for me. Oh, can you also do GS? And it will come up, especially if you supply the interface to the API. That's where, for a developer, this is quite useful. You don't need any other tooling because there's hundreds of tools by now. There's one coming out every day by now, and it's really insane. Some of the things to keep in mind is bias and other unwanted side effects, because the quality sometimes is perfect and good and usable, and other moments it's like, nah, I just wasted my time. And bias is quite an issue. It depends on what you feed it, and like I mentioned, if you feed it all of the internet, you do get all of the internet, which is sometimes not a good thing. If you only look at the Polish side, then you will get different results than if you would, for instance, pick something in Japan, because those are different cultures, different behaviors, different people, and it will also lead to different results, which is fine for those specific cases. If you only want Polish people and you use Polish input, it's fine, but if you use the Polish input to find Japanese people, you will run into issues. I have seen people wondering if they could use this for intake, so filter out the interviews and the CV sent in, but overall, yeah, the quality was lackluster, so it doesn't really work well. And it's all caused by the probability bias. So depending on the input you give it, you can expect some sort of output. And of course, you can adjust this. Like I mentioned with the images, I could feed it the ING branded images to make it look like the ING pictures. So you can do a lot of fine-tuning. But if you do that, you will create a new bias. And of course, we humans are biased too. That's because the things we know, our surroundings, our environment. And as a human, you can overcome this. But as an algorithm, no one is telling you to correct yourself. That's what still the human input does. It's all prompted, it's all requiring a human to say, hey, I don't want this, I want that. So please give me some suggestions there. As a human, you do this by yourself. So the nuance and the rational logic you have as a human is not available within this engine. It's just a probability engine. And that's something to really keep in mind. Some responses will make you think, oh, I'm talking to a human-like person. So if you would use a chatbot, it would give human-like reactions. But in the end, it's not a human. It's just an algorithm picking out, oh, this is the most likely answer I can give you, along with some randomizer. So humans will be necessary with the current solutions. You won't lose your job in that aspect. And if you adjust this, like mentioned with the images or with correcting the bias, you will create new bias. So whatever you do, test it really, really, really well. If you accept that 95% correct answer is fine for my goal, then you can use the solution. But you have to test that it will end up like that, so you don't get 80% and the 20% start complaining or walking away by your company or your solution. The other unwanted side effects, Stack Overflow is quite a common one. They said we don't allow any ChatGPT or any GPT supplied solutions because Stack Overflow is run and corrected by professionals. So they got so many requests, so many answers to review, they couldn't handle it anymore. And all of those looked confident in what they should answer, but they would not be the correct answer. So it would really basically spam the platform. And this is nice if you want to score some points on Stack Overflow, but for the quality of the platform, it's really damaging. So now they've banned it, it's still banned. You can't use them because they consider it harmful. Education is a big discussion as well in the Netherlands. I do think academics is not a big issue because if you generate your thesis with a GPT solution, that's nice and all, but you still need to defend it with your knowledge. So if you don't have the knowledge, then yeah, what good is the academic for you at that point? But for education, this might be a challenge. Kids not reading books anymore, but just give me the key points of this text. And then not learning, because you learn by doing, and you learn by failing. And if you don't fail anymore, because an AI gives you solutions, what do you actually learn at that point? What's something disturbing for me is the uncanny valley. So, for instance, I'm meeting a friend, shall we go to the cinema and this movie? And they said, well, number 2, and they get an auto-generated answer and a wall of text. Then I will receive that, and I will, oh, that's a wall of text. Let's ask an AI to shorten the keynote, the key points for me. At that point, you don't have any personal communication anymore. So that's, how can you handle it? When is an email real? When is text real? When is a PowerPoint real? When did I make this up? When did an AI make this up? And I am just telling you a story along with those words. So that's something that we'll have to start to live with, or maybe look each other up more in person, like having a conference in person here and having a face-to-face talk. Another thing many people don't know, if you do generate text with ChatGPT or with Copilot or any of the other solutions, you are responsible. Officially, if you generate something with ChatGPT and you use it, you have to say it's generated by AI. No one does this. But according to their guidelines, you have to. Code is another issue, because if you bring code to production and stuff breaks, and you say, yeah, I copied this from Stack Overflow, people will laugh at you. If you say, I copied this because the AI told me to do so, what good are you? So you have to keep in mind that you are always responsible for what's generated, and you always will have to check this. So your experience and your knowledge and your craftsmanship is still needed, and you still need to sharpen it over the years. In 5 years from now, you will still need to be a good developer, a good architect, etc. The copyrighted art is an issue, as mentioned. I don't know how that will turn out, because there is a court case at the moment. There was someone who wrote a comic book, tried to copyright it, that succeeded, and 1 month later it was rejected. Like, no, this is not possible. You can copyright a collection of images, but you can't copyright those images themselves because they are based on narrative works. They are based on art generated by other people before. And we don't know whose input was used for this, because it can be a combination of thousands or millions of other artwork. That is quite an interesting one, how we will solve that. So there's a lot of legislation also coming up, like what will this mean for us? So many solutions you have now and can apply today, maybe they will be, or you can't use them anymore in the future, or slightly adjusted. So the takeaways for the AI for developers: do experiment, do start working with these toolings. And like I said, there's hundreds, maybe by now thousands of tools to play around with, that do a lot of nice stuff. Do play around with Copilot if you can. I think you have a 2-month trial period. Same with Code Whisperer. And then look at your own private projects or open source projects, how it handles those, how it responds to code there. Because I do think IntelliJ was quite nice 10 years ago. I think this is the next step up for us, like helping us out with generating better, interesting code. And also, on the other hand, giving you more, pulling you out of the focus. That's the main challenge I see there. So if you expect the Copilot to augment you, to help you with encoding, and it doesn't, it really takes you out of the zone. So, oh God, I have to command set and let me think about it myself. Or let's ask a colleague to help me out. That really takes you out of the zone, and then at that point it's working against you instead of with you. Creating the value is of course quite interesting, and yeah, creating faster code or helping you out with diagrams to explain stuff. I want to explain this to a business party I'm having a meeting with in 10 minutes. This really helps out a lot. Normally you would have maybe 1 hour to prepare, like, oh, how am I going to explain this? I'm going to change these words into another word so they understand what I'm talking about, so I can bring the message across in an easier way. That is really helped out by this generative AI. But, as always, be vigilant, because you do have to worry about what is the quality of the either code I am generating or the text I am generating. Is it correct? As mentioned with the Krakow example, generated anagrams, the answers can be correct. It's more important that you get an answer than that you get the correct answer. Are there any questions? I do have a microphone, but... No? Okay, then I would like to thank you for your time.